Right, first of all, apologies from Adele Anderson, who couldn't make it today, but at the last minute, Andy Lane has stepped in.
I just happened to be here.
Don't applaud that much. He's had 10 minutes of warning. It's not even close.
I think we should clap twice as much if you take it.
Jane Fenn, Tracy Norman and myself, David Wake, are writers and are here to talk to you about that subject. Now,
without repetition, deviation.
yes.
I really wouldn't go that far.
I think,
Sorry.
Certainly with bad jokes thrown in.
it's going to be one of those panels, I suspect. I blame the women who've been drinking wine. Yes. Yay!
It's like women who lunch, but it's a little more dissolute.
Last year, specifically, we did it on publishing, so I thought this year we should talk about writing, but I don't care if it kind of veers off all over the place. And also, this is an opportunity for people to ask questions, so if you're interested in writing academically or because you want to be a writer, please stick your hand up and ask questions and stop us from rambling about something we don't care about in the slightest. I mean, do I ask questions like how did you get into writing or that sort of thing to get it started?
Yeah, I kind of did that like half an hour ago. And everybody else did the shit.
All right, well, if you missed Jane's talk a little while ago,
Where were you?
Where were you? Andy, very short. Why are you a writer?
I'm a writer because I have to be. I mean, somebody once said to Stephen King, why are you a writer? And his immediate response was, what made you think I had a choice? And I'm very much of that opinion. My mum's side of the family are correct, so this isn't going to be short. My mum's side of the family are very creative. My uncle was a painter, my mum painted, sang. So I think I had a creative gene anyway. Ever since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to write books, TV and so on. But it's also very hard to break it. So I did the sensible thing, I got myself a proper job and then did the writing evenings and weekends, gradually broke in through that. And then finally got to the stage, 14 years ago, where I could resign from the job and actually do the whole thing full time.
And you make a living, a good living?
I do as of about 2 months ago.
Did you get a really juicy one? Can you talk about it, or are you NDA'd?
Can I say something?
No, it's
No,
we're going to talk about it later.
Okay.
No, it's very quick. Why are you a writer? Yes.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to that later on.
I'll write it down.
Yes. But how did I actually become a writer? I grew up with Doctor Who fans and writing Doctor Who fan stories. And when the series wasn't on air after Sylvester McCoy's Doctor, Virgin Books got the license quite cheaply from the BBC to do original novels. Because the BBC didn't see any value in the series, so they did it cheaply. And a friend of mine, Paul Cornell, who's now...
Oh, we must have a chat. I'm great friends with Paul.
I mean, no, the series about 18. No.
Sorry, secret writer talk.
Do I want that?
No.
He got a contract from Virgin to do a spin-off novel. And my friend Jim Mortimer and I, we saw that news. And we were in the pub and we said, well, if he's going to do it, we're going to do it. So we sent him we actually phoned up Virgin and they said, well, okay, send us 3 chapters and a synopsis, just to prove you can do it. So we did. And then we got a phone call, this was a day before I was going to go to a writer's Milford.
Oh, Milford, I know it well,
Yeah.
been many times.
And she thought the day before, you actually we like your stuff, we're going to commission you to do a book. So I did a lot of school visits with kids always asking me, how do I become a writer? How did you become a writer? And I say, I found the path that nobody else can ever follow.
Yes.
That path is closed off, it can't be done.
Yeah, lovely. I'm going to be really rude now. It's not actually rude, but Luca has got a Guess the Chicken thing, which I've been doing, and has the best puns. So if you haven't done Guess the Chicken's name, just go see Luca. Sorry. I said I promise I'd do that. So they go,
Right, so how you become a writer is guess the chicken's name.
no, you don't, but there's some really good stuff.
Tracy,
So go see them. They're
why are you a writer?
I am a writer because somebody believed in me. I was the kid in class who finished all her work and would then slide a little book out from underneath her exercise book and would start writing in that and always got told off for it. So I've written as long as I can remember. But it was only about 9 or 10 years ago that I actually had the courage to submit a short story to an anthology. I wasn't paid for it, it was experience, and it paid off because the same publisher has also taken that big junky book there. Please come and buy it. Yeah, so basically I'm a writer because somebody believed in me, and we kept in touch after I had submitted to this anthology. And then
That's why you became a successful writer. That's not why you became a writer.
oh, but why I became a writer? Okay, I have told stories since I was, I don't know, 4, 5. I remember because my sister's about 5 years younger than me, and I remember telling her stories when she was too young to understand anything. And I have told stories for the rest of my life, basically. So
I think that's the same reason for me. Now I look back, I've always been writing. I did win an award at primary school for a short story. Interesting, wasn't it?
I won a poetry award, and that should have been a lesson to the judges to not let me do poetry because I'm really bad at it. For some reason, I did win a poetry award.
Mine was a very atmospheric piece about a boy going into a junkyard, delving into the depths of a junkyard, finding an alien spaceship, and then, that's 3 pages done. It exploded.
That's a good ending.
I did the writer's badge when I was in the Brownies, and I'm pretty sure the poor guy who was testing my work did not expect the full, thick exercise book with chapters and illustrations that he was presented with. And when he gave the comments back at the end of the test, he said, felt I was more up to guide standards. I think I was maybe 9.
It's that thing that when you're in school or you have you're vindicated, you're allowed to do it. It's like, yes, I can do the thing and get the marks.
We have a question already. Go on.
Is it about chickens' names?
It's not about chickens.
Seriously, there are some bloody brilliant names. Sorry, I shouldn't have sworn in front of you, Luke. They're really good names. You should have a go at it.
Luca was saying why he became a writer was, and you were talking about primary school, he was set a piece of homework.
Exactly.
And that's why he became a writer.
That is your gateway. That is your gateway, yes.
No, he was given, do you want me to tell what the piece of homework was? It was a prompt from school.
Yes.
And he wrote a story in the woods, and then when they got to the doorway, the piece of homework's finished. He said, what happens when they go through the door? And we just started writing.
Carried on from there.
And he was 9 years old as well in primary school.
Wow, that is earlier than I started on doing serious stories. But then, you know.
I think prompts, just things that happen in your life that trigger you and think, oh, that could be a story.
Yes.
I think I may have told the story last year, in which case, don't say that.
Yeah.
I did a 1-week residency in a school in Oxford. Right, one by one, I just got to give the same presentation to 70 different classes over the course of a week, and that was hell, because by number 15, have I said this before? Have I not said this before? What are we talking about? But at one stage, I was in the teachers' lounge, and I was just sitting there writing. A couple of teachers were talking. One of them had obviously just come out of the hospital, and he'd had an eye operation. And the other teacher said, oh, well, how are you? Is everything okay? And he said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, I keep seeing these things floating in the corner of my eyes. And I just thought, if only the other guy had said, oh my God, you see them too. That's a story. You get a prompt, but in real life, you never get what should happen next.
No, okay, well, that leads on to the obvious question is where do you get your ideas from, and why is that such a bad question?
I love Asimov's answer to that, which is that you need to milk and cookies out overnight, and the idea is come and eat the milk and cookies and stay. And Terry Pratchett's, which is, obviously I'm not, I'm quoting the great series, which is, I don't know where I get my ideas from, but I know where they go to. They go to my desk, and if I'm not there, they go away again.
Well, Stephen King's answer was, there's a shop in Poughkeepsie.
Yeah, that's right, the Asimov one. It's just like, mind your own business.
Birmingham Market in packs of 6. Yeah.
Oh, they do that.
I live near Dartmoor.
Oh,
Rush off into the moors.
Ideas are lying all around you. Wherever you look, there's an idea. Just that people who aren't writers don't see the thing.
You don't see it the same way.
No.
Yeah.
I'm driving up the E38 from Poole to get here yesterday. There's a big kind of flat marshy area just on the left as you come out of Poole, green and soggy. but there were these kind of cabbage-sized green things just spaced around, growing, and that's fine. You know, if you're Jeremy Clarkson, you write about agriculture and farming. If you're Stephen King, one of those things opens its eyes and watches you as you go. Thank you.
I think, you know, we're having ideas all the time. You take an ECG, scan your brain. There's lights going off here, it comes over here, it develops. You know, those are ideas all the time. The trick is to spot you've had an idea and write it down.
I have a tiny notebook, which
I think we all
just
do,
for
don't
that
we? We have the little
purpose.
notebooks.
Yeah.
Has anybody else had that thing where you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning from a dream
Yes.
and you think, oh my God,
This
that's
is
the
the best
plot
idea
ever.
ever.
When you scribble it
And
down,
then in
then
the
you go back to
morning,
it
it's
in the
like,
morning.
what bollocks? What is this?
They just say badgers rule the world.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Get yourself a pen that lights up. So you can
That
write,
doesn't
you can
help.
jot it
Don't
in the
stop it
night.
being bollocks in the morning.
My friend Paul Simpson had one of those. He got thrown out of a cinema once because we were writing a book, a non-fiction book about James Bond movies and books and comics and things. And he wrote the latest Bond film on the opening day. And he was just taking notes, and the manager came in and threw him.
Did you not say, but I'm a writer?
I'm a writer!
Write your ideas down such that you're writing them for somebody else. I think is the best advice. I used to have a little notebook, and I had a pocket in my waistcoat where it fit perfectly. So I'd write things in the notebook, and then I would copy it up into a computer file called ideas.doc. It's 27 pages long, or 27,000 words, something ridiculous. And it's full of ideas, and there's one that says, man meets a woman with a name, e.g. Yvonne. I wrote that in my notebook. I thought it's good enough to write my notebook. I thought it's good enough to type it up. And I dared delete it in case the idea comes back to me.
Yeah, you're right. Typing it up was probably the mistake.
If you see the hand, there's a question over there.
Yes, go, yeah.
Yeah, you just got me thinking because having survived all manner of things, I want more challenges and I want to challenge myself to do things. So I've actually written some things in the past. I have been published in various different areas. So you've just made me think, when can you call yourself a writer?
Whatever you want.
When can you call yourself a published writer?
When you start writing, when you have the idea that won't go away,
What's then?
Yeah, exactly. You're
then
right.
you're a writer.
There are lots of people who will gatekeep and say you are only a writer if you have published X number of books. Ignore all of
You're
that.
right,
If you
you're
are
right.
writing a story, you are a writer. End of discussion.
But you have to be writing. I mean, on the MA course, a guy who used to do the fiction module said, I used to be a novelist. And one of the students objected, saying, look, you've written novels, you're a novelist. And he said, well, no, because I'm not writing one at the moment. So I'm not a writer anymore. So you have to be actually writing.
Does that mean a truck driver is not a truck driver when he's at home having his tea?
That's a very Schrodinger question. I would think about it in a different light. I think about it, if you're a gymnast, you're always a gymnast. If you're in Starbucks, you're a gymnast.
Yeah.
The other way I think about it is, if you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. You're never off. That's another story entirely. Sorry, I just wanted to
So I agree with this guy. There was a big debate about whether what he said was right. And a lot of people disagreed violently because they thought, you know, I wrote a short story when I was in primary school, therefore I'm a writer, for goodness sake. Like, he was teaching us something, and what he was trying to teach us was keep writing. Keep actually pressing the keys. I mean, it is true that if you want to write a novel, all you have to do is sit down at a computer keyboard, press the keys 500,000 times, press save, and then you're done. That's it. All you have to do.
Robert Heinlein, the American science fiction writer from the 40s, 50s, he said the only rule of writing is that apply seat of pants to seat of chair.
Indeed. Yes, you have to keep going. Doesn't mean what you produce is going to be good. You definitely won't produce anything at all if you don't bloody write.
But the old saying is you cannot edit a blank page.
Exactly.
So you have to have something, even if it's crap, and you look at it, read it back and go, oh my God, what was I on? And delete
We've
it.
all done that.
You know, it's fine. Then you have another day to do it again.
Yes, that's completely true, isn't it? I mean, to write a novel, you've got to go through a number of stages. You don't know what those stages are when you set off, and one of those stages might well be write a crap version of chapter 3 and then delete it. But you've got to actually do that. You have to write the crap chapter. And you have to do it.
Can I ask a question of
Yeah, go on.
everyone on the panel, including myself? Are you a planner, plotter, or a
Plotter or pantser, yeah.
Pantser, seat of the pantser?
I'm a plotter, and here is
Oh, okay.
that book.
It's got
This.
The difference being, for anybody who doesn't know the writer's terminology, the plotters are obviously the people that spend 3 months exhaustively plotting exactly what's going to happen. It's like having a reviewing timetable.
Yeah.
So you know exactly what's going to happen at the end before you even start. Pantsers, see, the pantsers are the ones that start writing without even knowing where they're going.
What are you?
I'm a plotter, definitely a plotter.
Jay?
I've interviewed David, fancy writer, David Gemmell, sadly now dead, but I interviewed him years ago, and he said he'd written a book about the siege of a medieval citadel, fantasy citadel, which I can't now remember the name of. Somebody out there will. Yeah, it might have been Waylander. And then his publisher said, that's brilliant, we want a second one, follow-on, sequel. And he said he sat down and he started typing the first line, which was the horseman got to the top of the rise, and over there he saw Jerusalem. He thought, shit, this is not the book that I thought I was writing. And he realised he was writing an entirely different book, and did. And fortunately, his publishers loved it.
You can get away with that shit.
Yeah. Roger Zelazny, a big-time American science fiction writer of the 70s and 80s and 90s, again, certainly dead. He was a pantser. He would just sit down, blank page, start writing and see where it went.
So
which on the later books is actually very obvious.
You're all plotters.
Not exactly. So I am more of a pantser because I'm quite lazy, and although I do like post-it notes and stuff, I'd rather just it'll all come together. But funny how having a contract where you have to deliver a book makes you a lot more planning.
But that's going to sound like you're a pantser then.
I kind of somewhere in between the two, but I have definitely gone from the pants to the plot part of the spectrum because I could not afford to keep rewriting it. It took me, I think, in total 14 years to write my first novel, admittedly with a big gap in the middle as previously stated where I wasn't writing anything and was being angsty, but I was writing novel again. But
I'm someone who's interested in the mechanism of writing. So I've done plotting, I've done pantsing, and I am naturally a puzzler, which is a third type, where you write random stuff and then you try to fit it all together.
Oh my god. Oh my god, that's
Yes.
great.
but we salute you.
I'm not saying it's the best way, I'm just saying it's what
It's
I
a
do.
way.
John Buchan, author of the 39 Steps and various other classic 1920s and 1930s thrillers, defined his thrillers as you take 4 or 5 random facts, random things that happen, and then you find a plot that connects them all up.
Stephen King, of course, he's the situation and the characters and let them go. He's a pantser that gets away with it, goddamn.
That's a
talent.
sandbox type, isn't it?
Oh,
Well, who was the
Tim
guy who
Powers.
wrote One Foot in the Grave? He used to come up
David
with
Knobs.
yes, 5 things at random. He had to get them in the episode. It was always a challenge to himself.
Tim Powers, who's one of my favourite ever writers, and still alive, thank God, wrote a brilliant book called The Anubis Gates.
Oh God, I love that book so
An
much.
absolutely amazing book. What he's done for a number of books is to take a particular year in history and then exhaustively research that. Find, again, 5 or 6 facts that are quite bizarre ones, and then come up with a plot that connects them all up. And I tried to do the same thing years ago. I was writing a Doctor Who book, so I was researching 1608 England. I found Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Giovanni Bruno, and Galileo, all alive at the same time. I thought, that's a fact. And then I read a biography of Queen Elizabeth I, and there was this wonderful thing that she demanded that she be buried untreated, so the body was not preserved, nothing was done to it. So why? And then apparently 3 days into the mourning period, where the lady in waiting were sitting around the coffin exploded. Presumably because of the gases and everything. But again, you think, well, that's useful. Walter Raleigh's navigator, Richard Hakluyt, collected, when he was in South America with Walter Raleigh, collected specimens of a particular ore that had been dug out of the ground, trying to refine gold from it, as you did in those days. Couldn't get any, but he made the resulting metal into jewellery. It's absolutely true. He made the resulting metal into jewellery for which he gave to the ladies of the court, as you would. Some of them died or became seriously ill. He died of cancer of the nose, I think. So what he done was he dug up pitchblende and refined uranium from it without even knowing. My God, there's a whole book just in there.
Wow. Well, then that comes to this question here about research versus making it up. So do you do a lot of research and just make it up?
I have an anecdote, if I know.
Well, I'll follow your anecdote with mine.
We all have anecdotes. So I got my book deal, as previously mentioned, by having hangover in front of an important editor in there. And then you get that difficult second book, because you've spent years writing the first one, you're like, oh my God, right, what am I going to do? So my second book is set on a world that is apparently, and this is a lot of my stuff, is apparently fantasy, but it's not really blah, blah, there's something else going on in the background in the secret in life. And that world is, don't laugh, a bit like Wales. I love Wales, I love North Wales. And also I got into, again, don't laugh, drovers, really interesting culture, unique culture. There were things like, you knew, if you see 3 trees, old trees up right on the moors in Wales, that's because that's where there was a drover's stop, and there'd be somewhere where there'd be an inn or whatever. Lovely little things like that, how they dealt with all the branding, all that kind of stuff, which I got way too into because I got
racist.
Yes, yeah, with the knots, all of this stuff, put all of this in. Also, my hero had to go from the place that's like Wales to the place that's kind of the city, so there's a long walk with quite a lot of weather and scenery. And my research was immaculate, but when I sat down and had my editorial lunch, she basically said, lose all of the stuff we don't need, all the mud under the cows. And so I did, because she's...
That's the book.
Yeah, I know, but she was completely right. So, you know, you've got like a few hundred words referring to this in passing. But yes, you can get lost in your research, and you get fascinated by it. People need to know this.
Well, I recently read Terror by Dan Simmons, which they've recently done a TV series. It's the Franklin expedition to the South Pole, and things going wrong. But the incredible descriptions of what it's like on a sailing vessel, sailing for 3 months on end. I do not want to know any more about the stench of rotting food, gangrene. No, please, spare me that.
I've had a conversation 3 or 4 times with Linda Stratton, who is a very good crime writer. Her first stories are set in Victorian London, and she found out I was writing something set in Victorian times, the Do Club and the Empire of the Dead thing of this book. And she started to tell me that you should do a lot of research, that you can find out enormously fantastic things from the newspaper archive in your local library. You can get in there and find out what the weather was like on a particular day in 1899 or whatever. And she was trying to persuade me that this is the way to go. And I was saying, my characters are going to bring back people from the dead with lightning, so there's going to be a thunderstorm. Irrespective of what the weather was like on that particular day in 1899, there will be a thunderstorm because you need it.
So, excuse me, Ira Levin, who wrote Rosemary's Baby, it got optioned and it was bought up by Roman Polanski, who filmed it. But Ira Levin had a phone call from Polanski one day saying, on page, I won't do the French accent, I'll say it. He said on page 58, you mentioned that there's a copy of Vanity Fair on the bureau, turns to a shirt handler. Which copy, which issue of Vanity Fair was that?
Oh, wow. I guess they want the visuals.
Yeah. Roman, sit down. Explain fiction to me.
When I was writing Anna Stenberg, that's set in 1865, and when I was doing my research about, my characters travel basically from Dover to Calais and then down to Amiens. And so I spent a lot of time on Google Maps traversing this road. And I could probably drive that road now from memory. But one of the things that was really important in the book is that they were able to communicate between England and France. And of course, around about the time that my book is set, which is 1865, the telegraph had slightly messed up because the cables that they laid underground, under the seabed, didn't last more than about 3 months. So because my book deals with vampires and supernatural creatures, I also thought it probably wouldn't matter if I made sure that the telegraph actually was working at the time. So yeah, in 1865 there was no telegraph because what they had built hadn't worked. It had given up after 3 months. But in my book there is a telegraph system, so my character can converse with her relatives in England.
There always used to be a person who write into the Radio Times after some period detective series had been shown. So I think you'll find that the Jaguar XJS from 1958 did not have that design exhaust.
Somebody is in the room.
Like you
No,
get
he's
away
not.
with it because my book has vampires in it.
Somebody just had a go at me this afternoon about the Enfield on the cover of the book being wrong. Not the correct period.
It's not even your problem. That's the cover design.
Yeah.
Oh, that was you probably.
No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. But you know.
One of my young Sherlock Holmes books. The books have been sold to I think 43 publishers all around the world. So I keep getting random international copies arriving still. But my publisher got a note from the South Korean publisher saying, yes, Mr. Lane mentions Admiralty Arch just off the Trafalgar Square. I think you'll find that wasn't actually built in 1870. Corrected by the South Korean.
I think the advice is you should try and get it right.
This is why I
And
like
try
science
not to
fiction.
worry too much when you
Make
get it
shit
wrong.
up.
Yes, because
Just the law.
you can't find these things out. And there's also stuff you find out which feels wrong if you put it in a book.
Yes.
I mean, I found the expression in Victorian times as spiffing. It's perfectly reasonable. They did use that word. But for me, that sounds like a Second World War RAF pilot word.
Yes.
So it looks wrong, even though it's right.
Yes. Bicycles in 1860 did not have gears and chains. You saddled them and you just used your feet to paddle along. But I couldn't have a chase in a young Sherlock Holmes book between two people on a
Oh,
bike.
hilarious. You very much should have. Two brothers the fastest.
So yeah, I feel that one.
I learned it's called the Tiffany syndrome. You go into a medieval village in the 1400s or something, and you meet someone called Tiffany. Well, actually, that's perfectly reasonable. It seems like a very modern name, but it isn't. So if you put it in,
Yeah, we were talking
it
about
looks wrong.
It looks wrong, Christine, and things like that. So, are there any reenactors here? Yes, they are. So we were talking about the sort of realisticness of reenactment or not. And I don't know, I'm just waving at them, they're eating their dinner. You presumably had to stop yourselves from doing the thing where it's like, why is their head not covered? They would have lice. Why have they got all their teeth? Because if you're going to actually be accurate when you see something, it's not. It is always, always, always the 2024 or whatever interpretation of history, which, shockingly, is not actually history. It's a lot easier once I learned to let that go.
Yeah.
It's also just meant to be fun.
This is the other thing. Yes, I remember getting like Robin and Sherwood. I was very conflicted, the original one, because on the one hand, I really fancied the pants on Michael Craig, and on the other hand, his pants weren't authentic.
So actually, technically, you were fancying pants onto Michael Craig.
Yeah, but if they'd got his pants, I'd have been a lot happier in every way.
Otherwise known as what the deliberate mistake, the anachronism or mistake of the week, that was.
But one of the things I wrote down in our conversation was book
I
buying.
recognise
You want to talk about book buying?
Yes.
very like
Yeah, the one way I think I probably differ from quite a lot of authors is that the way my brain works, I have to see things in front of me to understand them. So looking at things on screen, when I worked for the court service before I gave that up and started doing dressing as Velma for full time, one of the jobs I had to do whilst working for the court was managing an electronic diary. That was essentially 7 shades of hell for me, because my brain does not work that way. I like to flip a page of a paper diary and go, yes, there is half an hour of time there for your case, I can put you in there straight away. Rather than go, yes, I'll just check this judge's no, I'll just check this judge's no. And it would take me like 25 minutes to find half an hour of space, as opposed to flipping through a few pages and go, oh yeah, there's half an hour there, I can put you in there. So, when I write a book, I do not, Mark does spreadsheets. My husband Mark, who wrote Zoinks, The Folklore of Scooby-Doo, does a spreadsheet. So he created this massive spreadsheet with about 1,000 lines, with a line for every episode of Scooby-Doo, which he has watched whilst I was painstakingly researching witches on the other side of the room. And every time I turned around and looked, what the hell are you doing? He was like, I'm working. You're watching Scooby-Doo, mate. You're watching Scooby-Doo. So what I do is I will print things out. So this, for example, is the person I don't know who this woman is, but this is the person who I had in mind for my main character, Victor. And she was the wallpaper on my phone for about 3 years. So I don't know who she is, but I'm absolutely in love with this girl because she has, she's just everything I wanted in my character. So when I read back over Anna Stenberg and I read about Victor, that is who I see. So there are things like, for example, stuff about vampires. There is stuff about the houses that I found on Google Maps, which I then put in the book, which are people's actual houses, plot things, but I have to see it this way. This might look really weird and kind of...
it's your process.
Yeah, exactly, but I have to be able to see it in front of me, otherwise the entire book just disappears for me. If I had to try to put it, for example, I'm currently writing non-fiction based on my audio drama Witch, putting together the story of the woman who inspired that, which has never been done before in its entirety. And I have got so much stuff electronically that I now cannot visualise the book because it's all hidden in my computer. I don't know what I've got. So I'm about to waste a lot of paper printing everything out so I can see what I have. So I'm very visual, but I need to have it tangible, visible, mind maps, able to scribble on things with notes. So that's why that is my novel.
This would be the wrong time for me to say there's an app that could do that.
Yeah, I also no, seriously, I tried Scrivener.
Yeah.
I hated Scrivener because it was all hidden in the computer. I couldn't see it in front of me.
I love Scrivener for one very good reason. To explain, Scrivener is a word processing kind of package like
It's
Word.
horrible, don't use it.
Except that you have a spine on the left, and you kind of attach.
Corkboards and things, chalkboards.
Yeah,
you can
it's a
do
really good
corkboards
idea.
with ideas for scenes,
Yeah,
and then put
it's
them on the
great.
spine and then expand them. The reason I love it is because if I'm writing a book, as I did, with 5 different character points of view, you can actually drag and drop entire chapter. You can colour code the section.
I've used it for
Yeah,
planning, but
I
there is a
tried
point
it.
where it's...
I did try it, my brain just
One of
doesn't
our
work that way.
One of our guest speakers for my publishing group, Institute Authors, was Janet Forbes of World Anvil, which has got a word processor built into it. It was originally to help you design and keep information on your RPG games and such like. So that's a sort of a huge database of writing articles and linking them together and all the rest of it.
There is a Microsoft thing called OneNote, which I've not tried. I keep meaning
Didn't
to.
get on very
Where you
well.
could
Not
paste in like
yeah.
web pages and blocks of text.
One of
Not
my
very
writer
writer-oriented, I
colleagues
didn't find.
used OneNote and was waxing lyrical about it. And then a couple of months later, he was waxing lyrical about these green pens he used. So I suspect OneNote didn't really judge it.
I did end up with one book I was writing with huge great corkboard with file cards of different colours for the main characters. And lengths of wool around the pins linking the
A
file
lot like a
cards
murder
together.
bed, yeah.
I was going to say that sounds like a murder board. I want one. When I was writing Witch, this is just how my mind works. I wrote out in longhand all my plot points that I wanted to have, all the research. So there was research about the accused, there was research about the law, there was research about the history surrounding it. And then having filled a notebook with this, I then I numbered everything because I'm that bad. And then every plot point went on a separate post-it note, and they went on big pieces of cardboard. And that enabled me to move things around physically and make the plot, because then the plot started, I could see it in front of me, I knew that I needed to take that one out, put that one in, and that was how I wrote Witch. And I'm so fond of those plots, I still have them stored in my attic.
And then 3 years later, you're looking at it in nostalgia and you find the file card off to the right. It's not linked to anything, it's got a brilliant idea. Why didn't I use it?
There were quite a lot of things that I keep thinking, why didn't I do? But they didn't fit in with the story. There was so much brilliant stuff I found for that didn't fit in with the story.
Murder your darlings.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of darlings that were murdered because it was fine as it was.
I've had to reread one of my books to generate a Bible because I never kept the Bible up to date.
When I was writing one of my books, because the characters were in different parts of the tree at different times, I worked out the way they did their calendar, and each month, and I put he's there, she's there, so that the story would read and make perfect sense. You wouldn't have a character doing something before the other character could have done it. And it all worked out in the end.
And then you get that lovely kind of Quentin Tarantino moment where you realise you've got two different characters in the same building in different rooms at the same time, but they don't know, and they often different. They tell you that the readers suddenly, no, hang on, he's there, he's there. Oh.
Yeah, the downside of science fiction is relativity. Generally, if you've got stuff going on in different places, there's only one solar system that had 4 different timelines in different parts of it, and it's like, has that happened there? They've got instantaneous transmission, but then again, it's going to take 2 hours for the message. Yeah, well.
Magical instantaneous communication.
Yeah, well, I had some psychic stuff as well, just to make it more confusing.
See, this is why I needed to have the telegraph working in my book.
Well, indeed, otherwise you'd just be buggered.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever done so much research that at the end of writing your book, you look at your research and realise there's a whole other book there?
That's where I am right now. That's where I am right now. I'm writing the book about this, about the research, putting the story together of the woman that inspired this show. And I have got so much stuff, a lot of it electronically. So basically, I've got to produce a manuscript by the end of January, and it's hell. So, yes.
My short answer is I'm quite lazy. I go down rabbit holes involving droving and stuff, but I don't do that much because I just can't be asked. Sorry if I really
I'm of that ilk, and I also think there was a danger of doing research. Story told by my fiction module lecturer was one of his former students was planning a historical fiction book. And they'd finished the course. He went to her and said, when you can start this book? And she said, I've just got 2 more books to read for research purposes, and then I can start. Of course, came to the end. And you met her 10 years later. You went, oh, how did you get on with your historical fiction book? And she said, oh, I've just got 2 more books to read, and then I can start.
That's actually a really good point, because I am finding, certainly with Witch, where do you stop? You have to have a point where you stop and say, right, okay, I'm not going to do any more research. What I have at the moment is going to be what the book is made out of, because I've done a lot of research over like the last 8 years for this book, and you have to stop at some point and say, right, that's it.
I had a slightly different problem in that I did so much research for the Walter Raleigh fantasy historical novel. Explaining coffins, Queen Victoria, Galileo Galilei, the clock of unusual design the Queen gave to Walter Raleigh, which nobody's ever found, all of that stuff. I've got an entire bookcase full of the research books that I'd read, and by the time I'd finished reading the books, it was as if I'd already written the book.
Yeah.
I couldn't, I was tired of it.
Yeah.
Actually tired of it.
So, similar to what you all just said, so would you prefer to write with or without deadlines?
No.
Question. I prefer to write with a contract I'll be paid for.
Yeah.
Sorry. It is a deadline. It concentrates the mind. It does concentrate the mind. And I have to say, before I got my first book deal, I was in a couple of critiquing groups, we can talk about those possibly, which are really useful. And the only deadline was, well, we're meeting next Thursday, do you have anything to put in? And I'm like, chapters to put in because they all have chapters and if I haven't done one, I look like an idiot. So yes, for me personally, something to kick me up the arse is great.
Yeah.
Publishers usually give you a decent amount of time. There's never leads time to write a book. So for me, they might give me 6 months to a year. And in 6 months, if I write 500 words a day, I've got the book. It's brilliant. Okay. And then 3 months later, it's like, oh, okay, well, I do 1,000 words a day.
Yeah.
And then 6 weeks later,
oh shit!
2,000 words a day. And I actually know what my limit is. I can write 5,000 words a day for about 3 days, or 4,000 words a day for probably a week before falling over. So it's like there must be a diagram that everything's pressed up.
Yeah.
It's like a kind of pear-shaped thing with in
I'm-
smaller and smaller.
I'm at the point now where it's November, it's NaNoWriMo. I don't ever do NaNoWriMo, but I'm going
Yes.
to pretend I am.
I did that once for a deadline, exactly the same. It's like, oh, there's this like structure that's supporting me, my deadline panic, bring it on.
Well, Douglas Adams famously said, I love deadlines, I love the whooshing sail as they whiz past my head.
I'm self-published, so all my deadlines are self-imposed,
How do you
and
discipline
I don't
yourself?
have to keep to them. I just plug away and then you finished it. And
Well,
then
we admire your willpower as
Yeah.
people that haven't imposed upon us.
Pan is a great
Yeah, oh,
subject.
it's
But
certainly is.
surely
it's a
it's
good
better to write a
incentive.
novel in a reasonable period of time without panic.
You would have thought.
Yeah.
But yes, which is why I do that.
When you have a child that says, Mum, I need to go to the stables, Mum, I need to be driven here, Mum, I need to be driven there. It's surprising how much it eats into your writing time. She has a better social life.
Oh, question.
I have a question. Just talking about research and all of this stuff doesn't get used, especially what you said about your editor saying, you need to take this stuff out about the cows of the mud. And I'm just wondering, how do you have difficulty of figuring out, okay, is your idea better than the idea that your editor or your friend or someone you've been talking to has given you? How do you say, yes, I'm going to use mine, or no, I'm going to use yours? What do you do?
Generally, a professional editor who's been in the business for a long time is going to see stuff that you won't see, and you should always give it due consideration. Weirdly, the only time I ever pushed back against literature was in a sex scene. I know this sounds terrible, which basically was quite meant to be as disturbing as that brain leech, because that fulfilled the needs for the plot. And yeah, and I still am. I've not reread it since. I was meant to be on a panel at Bristol College about writing sex and things. Who knew why they put me on it? Anyway, last week, and I was ill, and I was going to reread it, and I'm not sure if I reread it whether I would actually agree with her. But at the time, it was so important to me that these things happened, even though they were unpleasant, that I pushed back. But I'd say 95+% of the things that I get as editorial notes.
I completely agree. I trust the editors.
They know what they know on which they speak.
They know the audience in a way that I probably
Yeah.
don't. So if they say, no, you can't. On the Young Sherlock Holmes books, I think the fourth one I did, my editor, the one for Rachel McNally, she said, look, Andy, halfway through this book, the characters go off for a separate adventure and then loop back, and you can cut that whole 2 chapters out.
And sell it as a short story.
I did.
Fantastic.
Because her replacement came to me and said, oh, Kindle wants a short story.
How convenient.
Yes.
I have one of those.
I think I'm the other way round, because I self-publish, so effectively I employ an editor. So I get my stuff edited, but I can overrule it.
We
It's
can
a
all
danger.
overrule it.
I was going to ask the question in a minute about beta readers, but before we do that, editors generally are rational human beings, and if you go back with an argument and say,
Yeah.
not a real argument, but a rationale,
A
say,
reason.
I did it this way for this reason.
See further section.
9 times out of 10 they will back off and
Yeah.
say, well, okay then.
Yeah.
I had a really, really weird editing experience with Anna Stenberg. You will see it's quite a chunky book. And I've,
What's that,
I'm
90,000, 100,000 words?
178,000 words.
Oh, yeah, come
That's
on.
not a trade.
It's quite
That's
a
not
lot.
a trade paperback
So,
or mass market.
I'm
This book
you
is
know,
bigger. far away.
brevity is not my strong point. I used to write for a newspaper, and writing 500-word articles was A, hell, and B, good discipline.
Yeah.
And C, hell. So when I wrote Anna Stenberg, basically I did what every writer does. I wrote the story that I wanted to tell, and it was quite long. And so I thought, the editing process will tell me where I'm kind of being fluffy and where there are bits that can be chopped out. And the editor said, are you sure that rhododendrons grow to the size of trees?
Oh, I've had some very bad edits.
and
If we
I
want to
had
talk
things
about
like
bad
that.
edits, we can all go there.
And so, so Anna Stenberg ended up being 178,000 words, which gets, good reviews, so, please don't let that put you off if you want to buy it. But, I kind of expected more from the editing process. And she started off by saying, I'm not here to change your story. And I'm like, well, that's a shame, because I was kind of hoping you would tell me where I'm going wrong.
I think,
Sorry, Chris.
well, I was going to say, I had an editor who commented on one of my books, and I utterly disagreed with him. But I was so grateful for his comments because it clarified what I really
What
wanted
you
to
actually
do.
wanted to do.
And
Quite
so
often
it's a
you don't
better
do
book
it.
from that.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
always do what they say, but the fact they've highlighted the problem, quite often it's like, oh, actually, yeah, that was an issue, I need to go and rethink that.
And then you get editors who don't get what you're doing, because in one of the short stories that I submitted to an anthology when I first started, I was using antiquated language and punctuation of the era, which, if you've ever read Dickens, I was emulating that. And the person went, oh, you don't need to write it this way, you need to do it. And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I'm overruling every single thing you said, because that is not the point of what
The
I'm
odd thing is, if
writing.
you're writing a Sherlock Holmes pastiche, you have to adopt that.
Yeah,
It was in the
absolutely,
winter of
yeah.
1865, I
Yeah.
recall,
Yeah.
my friend Sherlock Holmes and I were acquainted with
Yes!
concept of all
Yeah,
that.
I've only written one commissioned Sherlock Holmes story, and I was kind of embedded in it, I loved it, but I don't think I can, how many of these have you written? Because I don't think I can do it for too long.
I've got an entire book of Sherlock Holmes pastiches,
Oh,
so I wrote loads of
wow.
them. But two stories. Firstly, old friend of mine I was saying that I was talking with Jessica Palmer, a horror writer. Daughter of two circus clowns, and if that's not going to make her a writer, then nothing is. She was in England. She wrote a novel which was published in England and then sold to America. So about 6 months later, she had a phone call from the American publisher saying, okay, I just wanted to check which chapter, we made some changes, which chapter would you like the baby to die in? And she said, what baby?
Oh my God.
And that's when you get an editor that thinks they're a writer.
Yes, yes.
And that's a bad experience, because they will just rewrite your book. The second thing is I just started reading Dan Simmons, who wrote Terror. He wrote one of his early novels called Carrion Comfort, the first novel he wrote. And he got bought by a publisher who then went bankrupt. So they got bought up by another publisher. And they were working with him, the editor was working with him. She sent him 6 pages of closely typed notes. And so he rewrote the book and sent it back. And she sent him another 6 pages of closely typed notes. And he rewrote the book and sent it back. And she sent him 5 pages of closely typed notes. And he could see where this was going. And then he had a phone call from her, which she said, look, I think what we're going to do is, we're going to keep the title and just write a new book. At which point, he and his agent bought the book back from the publisher.
Wow. Rather stuff up to me, I'm a director.
That's not a good start.
That is not good. Yeah, I've only had one terrible edit, which is basically, I was published by Angry Robot for my duology, and they disintegrated between book 1 and 2. And I think they basically dragged somebody off the street to edit book 2. Because the things that they would do, it's just like, have you actually read any science fiction or science fantasy? Do you actually have any clue? And I just realised there is no point. I love it when an editor gives you notes that will improve, but these won't. So I just basically said, no, this book is not as good as it would be if a proper editor had done it, but there isn't a proper editor available.
Look on the bright side, another 5 or 10 years, AI will be able
Oh,
to edit
don't.
books for you.
Oh, no.
Bad word, bad word.
That's great.
I've moved into editing, edited other people's books professionally. And,
Do you find yourself just wanting to rewrite it forward?
I do
Or do
mention.
you have a separate mindset?
Yeah, I do
separate
mention
mindset,
editing as well, so
you've
yeah.
got to make it the best book that they can write, not what you would want to write.
Yes,
because
we were
they're
talking about this
compatible.
earlier. I'm currently mentoring somebody who, I don't think their book will be published. They have certain obsessions. They want that to come out. That's how they want it to work. I have to gently make the book the best it can be without saying you really need to change this fundamental thing about it, because that is what matters to them. And that's their book. Ultimately, it will stop it from selling, but that's not what they actually wanted. We have Zoom calls, and it became obvious that's a thing. We'll work around this thing, because
It's a hard line to tread.
it's a
isn't
very,
it? Because
very hard line to
You've
tread.
got to kind of think, what do people want to read and what does the author want to say,
Yes.
and try and kind of balance the two.
Yeah.
I would
It's their book, ultimately. That's what they want. I'll make it as best I can within the parameters that I now realise I'm working in.
You have to remember that I think John le Carré's first book was rejected 9 times by publishers.
Oh yeah, I don't know, I'll take 10 from mine. It's only because of my getting drunk.
June got rejected, what, 23 times?
I'm not surprised. It's a terribly written book.
Yes.
And
But the
30
ideas.
Harry Potter itself.
I tried. I've not managed to alienate the audience yet.
I wanted to talk about, well, ghostwriting. You want to talk about ghostwriting?
Can you have the chance to alienate the audience
Keep
before
going.
we talk about ghostwriting? When my son, you'll see my son wandering around, he's got piercings and he's 6'5", but we started going to Armadacon, he was about yay big. But when he was about yay big, I started reading into books to him. And I thought, okay, we'll do Harry Potter. I'll read you Harry Potter. So I started reading Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And after the first session, I thought, I can't do this. I can't spend the next 3 months reading out this, but it's terribly written. To say it to an audience of school kids, they go, so it goes.
Well, no, after said that, we don't want to know what else you want to say.
Now, she went down to the crossroads and made a deal, that's all I'm
But
saying.
if you were somebody else, what would you say about ghostwriting?
I've ghostwritten 3 novels for somebody else. A couple of which are on sale, my wife's jewellery thing. I can say it now because it was a long time in the past. It was a guy called Nigel McCreary who created Silent Witness and New Tricks. He got to the stage where he would sell a proposal for a book to a publisher, then he'd get distracted and go take the money and go off and do something else. So I came in and wrote 3 books in a series for him, and then found out that nobody told the publisher.
Did he not admit that he was... Oh, Jesus.
No, he would. If they came to him and said, "Oh, we've got a problem with this thing on page 56," he'd say, "Well, hang on a second, let me think about that."
So what did your contract look like?
It was a great contract.
Were you working for an agent or not?
Yeah, he and I shared an agent.
Oh, right, okay.
So, which was useful.
Have
so
you fired them since?
No.
Yeah, it's good to know.
Do you, when you're writing it for somebody else, do you think, oh, that'll do a lot?
No, I did the opposite. I thought I can try things here that I've never tried before and probably wouldn't under my own name.
The
so
safety of
you-
anonymity.
It's your test bed.
So it was a series of mysteries and called crime novels, and I'd never done a crime novel before. But I think I've said this before, stop me if I have, but all detectives obviously have a problem. They're either morose drunkards like Morse, they're slobs like Columbo, they're in a wheelchair like Ironside. There's always something they've got wrong with. So I thought, all right, I'm going to give my detective a problem, because nobody cared, it's not me. Right? And I found this thing called synesthesia, which is a mental condition where senses are cross-wired. Senses are cross-wired, so you can taste shapes or hear tastes, that kind of thing. So I'll give the detective synesthesia. But if I do the obvious, he can see noises or something. People say, "Oh, you just wrote that for television because it's visual." So I wrote it so he could taste sounds, which is great because if somebody was lying to him, he'd get a taste of grapefruit in his mouth, and that proves because the problem the detective has always turns out to be their big advantage, their superpower. So yeah. There is now a reason why it's never been optioned for TV or film. Because it's impossible to film. But I don't care.
True, yeah, you're in their head, in their senses.
Yeah. But I've got a friend, Ben Jeeps, who...
Ben's lovely as well.
Ben,
So we know all the same people, we're going to go to the bar with Ben.
Ben and I used to be in the same writers group together, with Charlie Stross.
Ah, indeed, yeah.
But Ben, I'll give it away now, he's been ghostwriting for Bear Grylls. So you're making
about that.
You're making quite a lot of money from that.
Yep.
I was having a drink with John McClay, who used to run the Bath Literary Festival. He's now a scout, and that's a thing we talk about. Back in the day, in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, you could send your book to a publisher, and then came the rise of the agents. So you could send your book to an agent, and they would send it to a publisher. And now we've got scouts who work for the publisher, so you've got to send your book to the agent, they've got to contact the scout. There's more and more people between you and the publisher. John McClay, I was having a rant with him about celebrities who get ghostwriters in to write books for. I said, bloody David Walliams, you've got all these books, there's somebody else who's written them and not taken them. And he said, no, David Walliams, hand on heart, David Walliams writes all his own books, which I am very surprised about.
Really?
But I believe John. No? There are very few that aren't.
Okay.
Yeah, but David Williams wrote sketch comedy, didn't he?
He did.
So he's coming from a writing background.
This is why I was surprised to hear that this stuff was ghostwritten, but I've heard this stuff is ghostwritten a lot.
Yeah,
And
it's
not.
no, it's not. I think people get kind of jealous and say, oh, it must be ghostwritten. But it was Keira Knightley's just signed a deal to write children's books. She's been interviewed and she said, oh, this is going to be a children's classic. No, you're not allowed to say that, Keira.
No, Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Any more questions? I'm conscious of the time. Oh, that's killed it completely.
They may be conscious.
Do you want to sum
A
up?
question to my friend at the end there.
Oh, yeah.
You were going through the great detectives that have disappointed. You forgot the greatest one of all. Sherlock Holmes was a drug addict.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the amount of people you say Sherlock Holmes is, and they go, oh no, he can't be, he's the greatest detective.
But it was socially acceptable then.
That's the interesting
And it's even in the books,
because
5% solution.
he said that you say it's socially acceptable. It was generally Victorian London. He said that his doctor Watson kept trying to get him off of it.
Well, because he was sensible.
There was
Yeah.
an awareness. That it
Yeah, there was
a bad
awareness,
thing.
but it wasn't something that condemned you automatically.
But
No.
these were the days when they were marketing radioactive drinks, radioactive water for all kinds of oil.
And ghost hoaxers were painting themselves in phosphorescent paint, which was very slightly carcinogenic.
Those were the days.
Oh, yeah.
Before health
Victorian
and safety,
values, yeah.
before the woke brigade.
Yeah, back then you could die of all
One
sorts
more
of things.
question here. Go on.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the kind of Patreon model of supporting writers.
Oh, fantastic. Support me on Patreon. Right. That's it.
Was that a planted question?
No, but I'm going to buy you a drink later.
Each of you
I
got
read a lot of
30 seconds on
self-published
Patreon
authors
starting
that,
now.
like, they put their chapters onto Patreon, so you can read them early on Patreon, and then they come out later online, and then eventually they go through to
Is there a
Kindle.
beta reading process of that? Can people comment on it? Is
No,
that-
well they can.
Okay,
They can give comments, but I think
Yeah.
Patreon is good because it opens things up. I specifically use it for audiobooks because I am in a limbo with my audio rights with Gallant, so they never utilise them. So I can utilise them by my Patreon, and I'm like voice train, so I can do all that shit. And then I can sell it to people on a monthly basis. Yes, I am saying to promoting this, but it's a unique shtick. So if you've got a unique shtick, you can do it on Patreon. But it's also quite good for people to start up. And I know quite a lot of authors like Emma Newman, who writes a lot of short stories. She'll never sell all of them. They're there for her patrons. So I think it's generally a good thing. Patreon has had some issues.
I know it's not quite the same. I worked on a couple of Kickstarter short story anthologies.
Yes,
where
it's a
you come up with the
similar
idea, get a list of most of the contributing writers, and then get it
They
funded
can
for
be very
Kickstarter.
lucrative, and they can work
Yeah.
out well both for the people that are actually supporting
Well,
it
it's the
and
only
the
short story
authors.
I've ever got royalties for.
Oh, right. Cool.
I've never tried Patreon. I've thought about it every now and then. There's a cautionary story before there was Kickstarter on Patreon. Stephen King, he was doing it via email. He'd got a thing where he'd start writing a novel, and then he'd send the chapters out to email to all his
Yes.
subscribers. It was called The Plant, and they would send him money, and then he'd write the next chapter and send it out. And it's available on the internet. I think he's quite happy with it. He got up to about chapter 7 or 8, and then he realised he didn't like the novel.
Yep.
So he stopped writing, and I think he sent the money back to the subscribers.
Yep.
Andy, you stopped telling the story right at the beginning.
Oh, no.
Did you come back to it
Oh,
later?
yes. This was on the.
We're now later.
This was on the. This is about as late as it gets, isn't it?
We're 1
Yeah.
minute over time, so.
All right. Well, very quickly, this was the question: do you make a good living as a writer? I made an okay, actually fairly decent living out of writing, until about 4 or 5 months ago, when I signed a deal with Amazon Prime to do Young Sherlock Holmes as a TV series.
Which I'd like to see.
It is currently being filmed with Guy Ritchie directing the first 3 episodes. The wonderfully named Hero finds Tiffin from the Fiennes acting family as Sherlock Holmes. Is it Joseph Fiennes, who's his uncle, playing Sherlock's dad, who's not in my 8 novels. Colin Firth playing a character called Sir Bucephalus something, who is not in my novels. So I'm somebody else playing Sherlock and Natasha McKellen playing his mum, who is not in my novel. And somebody else playing Moriarty, who is not in my novels. And I'm beginning to get the feeling they're diverting well away from my books.
You will take the money and run.
I have
though.
taken the
Yeah,
money.
very nice.
Somebody, Elmore Leonard, who wrote Get Shorty and various other classic American crime novels, somebody phoned him up and said, Elmore, I've just seen the film of your latest book. It's terrible, they've ruined your book. And he said, No, no, they haven't. It's up on the shelf. I can see it. It's absolutely fine. That's the way I feel about it.
Exactly.
But Macmillan are rejacketing and reprinting the Sherlock Holmes book. Young Sherlock Holmes.
You can't lose, can you?
No.
Because if the TV film or whatever comes out and it's really good, you go, oh, well, yeah, obviously it's based on my book. And if it comes out and it's really dreadful, you go, well, yeah, they ruined the book, they read the book. It's much better.
Yeah. But thank you for asking.
On that point, I'm going to have to say thank you to these panels who've been here for 4 minutes longer than they should have been. And Elaine, Jane Fenn, Tracy Norman, myself, Bill Wade.